I am Donald, and I am 56 years old. My name is Donald. I am making an attempt to explain my life for the very first time. We have a daughter who is 13 years old, and my wife, Lauren, is 45 years old. We have always been married. This event took place a few months ago for those who are interested. We were traveling to Istanbul with our daughter, and my wife and I were also there. We were a part of a large group consisting of 3 families, with a total of approximately 16 people. At this point, the journey had come to an end, and we were supposed to continue on together. All of us gathered together at the airport in Istanbul in preparation for our trip back to Chicago. It is a flight that lasts for 11 hours. All of us got together and made an account, which included everyone's contributions. As a result of the flight being delayed by 6 hours, all of us went to the lounge because we still had 6 hours until our designated departure time. It came as a complete surprise to us that it was vacant. It was just the 2 of us in that location. Everybody gathered together and began talking, all of them smiling and sharing stories about Turkey and the delicious food that we had. After going outside for a cigarette, I came back 15 minutes later. When I was getting closer to my wife, I noticed a thin figure standing close to her. It was as I got closer that I noticed that my heart was beating faster. It is not because of the nicotine, rather, it is because of something separate. As I got closer, the rate at which it beat increased. It was almost as if I could hear my heart attempting to leap wildly out of my chest. My thoughts went completely blank, and I found myself transported back in time 20 years. Her hand was in mine at the time. Within the walls of the church, I was present. She was standing right next to me. I kissed her after announcing, "I do," with a smile. After I brought her back to my house, we began a life together. Instantaneously, I found myself back in the lounge area. After walking close to my wife and informing her that I needed to get some fresh air, I then left the room. As I walked out of the room, I did not look at the woman who was communicating with my wife at that moment. The floodgates of my memories allowed me to access them. There she was, on the spot. I was happy, and she was happy as well. As soon as I closed my eyes, I found myself back in Columbus, Georgia, standing right next to the Chattahoochee River. Many times, we sat there. Maria is her maiden name. My life revolves around her. She has been someone I have loved ever since I first laid eyes on her in college. I controlled her. In addition to getting married, we moved in together. The beginning of married life was wonderful. I began my career as a journalist, and she went on to become an expert in the field of finance. I was required to travel for my job, and I traveled quite a bit. When I was traveling, I covered a wide range of stories, from war to famine. During this entire time, I never failed to stay in touch with her. The twinkle in her eyes brightened my day. When I was at home, we would spend our time making love to each other and eating the delicious food that she would prepare for us. Delectable was the word. Maria glanced into my eyes and asked, "Will you always love me like this?" as she looked into my eyes. I gently stroked her bare back and told her, "Forever and ever." The first 2 years of our lives went by without any problems, and it never seemed like there would ever be any problems in paradise. Due to the fact that we needed to develop our careers, we made the decision to postpone having children. We had the goal of achieving financial success and settling down. We were only able to interact with one another for a short period of time, which was the only problem we encountered. As soon as I started traveling, Maria's job started requiring her to travel as well. My mother was the only part of our family that caused us to feel dissatisfied. She was a solitary being who frequently desired to visit me. She was never to my wife's liking. Nobody ever asked me why. As a person, my mother is a very gentle and caring individual. I made an effort to keep them apart and to maintain a sense of equilibrium between them. The illness that my mother experienced occurred during the month of January. I informed my wife that I would be going to her house in order to provide care for her. On account of the fact that I had just returned from covering a story in Iraq, she was not pleased. We had a disagreement because she wanted me to avoid going to my mother's house and instead hire someone to help her. When I told her that my mother was getting on in years, I also mentioned that this could be the last time I see her alive. The fact that Maria was unhappy was not something I bothered to address. My mother passed away while I was holding her 3 days later. I was in utter disbelief. Upon my return to my house following the burial of my mother, Maria offered yet another complaint regarding my mother. I was taken aback and unable to comprehend what it was that she was attempting to convey to me. She put us in so much trouble, she should have been in the hospital right from the start, said Maria in response. I did not speak, and I continued to make an effort to comprehend. What will Maria gain from demeaning a dead person? I responded with another question. Maria quickly became enraged and said, "She is dead, she will not come back and respond, so zip it." As a result, we did not communicate with each other during that week. I decided to take her out to dinner in order to break the ice. During that night, we engaged in passionate sexual activity. The following week, I traveled to Afghanistan to report on the historic Silk Road. While this was going on, Maria was advancing her career and increasing her financial standing. It was 2 weeks after I had returned that I went to Afghanistan, and this would be the time that I went there. As soon as I arrived at my house, Maria greeted me with a full embrace and a sloppy kiss, just as she always does. During dinner, I noticed that she was feeling a little anxious. "We need to have some changes in our lives," she stated in her speech. I questioned it by asking, "What kinds of changes do you want? You being away from home for long durations is not helping me. There are days that I long for you, and I come home to an empty bed. I don't want to cheat on you, so either find a job that keeps you near me or find me a job so that I can travel with you." I found myself in a difficult situation, but at the same time, I was relieved that she was truthful and honest in her statements. My response to her was that I would look for another job. The conversation had come to an end, and the following morning I resigned from my position and began looking for a job that was closer to my home. It wasn't long before I discovered one on the local television channel. Even though it did not pay as much as my previous job, it allowed me to remain close to Maria. When I told her about my job, she became enraged and asked, "Are you kidding me? Your salary has decreased by 30%. I made an effort to explain that this would be a disadvantage for a workplace that is stationary. In spite of the fact that they may be highly educated and intelligent, there are times when women do not want to acknowledge the facts and continue to want things to continue in their favor. It would be impossible to obtain a job that requires you to remain stationary and still receive a raise unless you decided to switch careers. It was upsetting to her that I will be bringing less to the house, and that this will have some kind of effect on her way of life. That was the next step that we took. Things began to deteriorate over the course of the subsequent 3 months. We were having fewer conversations, and during the evening, we were hardly ever involved in any activities. Her demeanor had shifted from that of a loving wife to that of a snippy one. Despite the fact that she was able to find flaws in everything, there was not a single day that I went to bed without feeling angry. It got to the point where she came to me one night and asked me to stop breathing because she was having trouble sleeping due to my breathing. After some time had passed, I was unable to locate my phone, so I decided to use my wife's phone to make a call to my own number. My phone was locked when I found it. This was a novel experience. According to my recollection, she never had any kind of lock on her phone, and I did not have any kind of lock on my phone either. Where did the lock come from? Could she be concealing something? The evening was a Thursday. Following a late-night party with her office girls, she returned home that evening. Upon hearing the doorbell, I proceeded to open the door. As she stood there, she wore a black dress, her hair was tangled up, and she did not do her makeup. I asked her, "What happened to you?" while I was holding her. The response that she gave was, "I danced a little bit too much, and now I am tired." I accompanied her to her bedroom and showed her the way. Taking off her dress, she changed into the night dress that she typically wears. That was a very serious error. She did not have any underwear on, and I noticed that she had a bruise on her left thigh. At no point does she venture out without her underwear. Is it possible that she went commando today, or did she misplace them somewhere? On that particular evening, I was unable to fall asleep and lay there. I was a journalist by profession, and I was interested in discovering the truth. There are a lot of people I know who are able to assist me in discovering the answer, but I was already aware of it and did not require any assistance. After a period of 3 weeks, I found myself standing outside of the Motel 6, located on Victory Drive. I followed Maria's car until it arrived at this motel at 2:30 in the afternoon. As I made my way towards room number 12, I opened the lock and noticed that the monitor was located directly across the door. Across the room was my cherished wife, who was there. On all fours, she was there, and her blonde lover was engaged in some activity. Steve Bowman, her blonde lover and my dear enemy from our time together in college, had a thing for Maria and even took her out on a date before Maria started dating me. He was always in a relationship with Maria. While Maria shrieked in ecstasy, Steve complied with her request. As of this moment, my tears had stopped flowing. I was completely lifeless on the inside. My heart was in pain. Maria was able to obtain results after conducting an investigation and running around for 3 weeks. The outcomes that I had never desired. Despite the fact that I had made a commitment to the manager of the motel that I would not resort to violence, I had the urge to break open the door and do something that was extremely foolish. By doing so, he was repaying an old favor and imposed a single condition: there would be no violence and there would be no damage to property. Although he agreed with me and personally assisted me in installing the recording devices in the room, the possibility of violence was never eliminated. I gave a friendly smile as I exited the motel and walked out of the location. When I arrived at the parking lot, I got into my vehicle and parked it directly behind the one and only Mustang that was found there. Mr. Steve was the owner of it. I rummaged through my collection of ice picks and decorated each of the 4 tires. I bided my time. They appeared after an hour had passed. By Maria's bare waist, Steve was holding her in his arms. This was captured by my camera. After putting my camera away, I exited my truck and went outside. I headed in their direction and positioned myself directly in front of them. Maria went completely silent and appeared to have seen a ghost. There was a sly grin on Steve's face, which was a representation of him stealing the wife of another man. Even now, he was holding her by the waist. "Hey, Don," she said with a smile, "what are you doing here?" I kept my gaze fixed on her question. Her voice became mute. She made another attempt, saying, "I can explain, it's not what you think." This time, my eyes were directed towards Steve's hand that was on her waist. "I am not thinking, just observing," she said. "I suppose he has taken away my wife," I smiled. "I guess he has." "No, it's not that. We just had a meeting here," she responded to questions. "Meeting involved getting on all fours and getting drilled from behind? Did he do you good?" I asked the question. When she realized that she had just uttered the same words a few minutes earlier, she let out a gasp. "All your action is on video and will be going to your office. I will make sure it goes to all our friends and family. And yes, it will be going to Linda and her dad." Steve exclaimed loudly, "Leave Linda out of this." "Yes, she has no business in this," Maria said in response. "Her husband is screwing my wife, so yes, we have a lot of business, unfinished ones to be precise." I responded with a smile. "Linda has already seen your action as it happened and is just waiting for the copy of the video so that she can drag your sorry ass to court for a divorce. If I were you, I would prepare myself to say goodbye to dear old Mustang as it will be sold out to pay for the settlement." Now that he was angry, he lunged at me, which was a terrible mistake. I became a tough man as a result of my years of travel to various locations, including Afghanistan and Iraq. I had been in the company of warriors, fighters, and individuals who had been trained to strike and kill. Have I picked up a few new skills from them? After blocking his right hand, I ducked forward and landed my left hand on his chin. He then threw a right hand. He fell to the ground like a handful of potatoes. After rising to his feet, he took a few steps in my direction, but he was met with an uppercut to the chin. He remained in that position unmoving, he did not get up. In utter disbelief, Maria stood there. After taking a look at her, I instructed her to get into the truck. After she got into the truck, we set out on our journey. We did not make it home. Instead, we went straight down to see my attorney. Maria attempted to inquire, but I simply raised my hand in response. After entering the office, we were instructed to proceed to the large conference room as soon as we arrived. Each of us took a seat on the opposite side of the long table. There was a terrible lack of sound. It wasn't long before my attorney, Ron Freeman, entered the room and presented Maria with an envelope. "You have been served. Now, let me explain the terms. We have filed for divorce based on irreconcilable differences. You guys hold no property, there's nothing to discuss. His mother's house is yet to be legally transferred in his name, so you will not claim that. He will give you half of the money from your joint account. As we speak, the account has exactly half the money it had in the morning, so you may withdraw it. Since you earn more than him, there is no alimony. There is nothing else from my end." Ron left the room without saying anything. Maria looked at me while she held the envelope in her hand. I concluded my conversation by saying, "In case you want to contest it, I will change the reason for the divorce to adultery and make sure that every soul that knows your name will know of your cheating exploits. Every recording I have will be shared on all social media platforms. I will send this to your office and make sure that your cheating ass is fired and you get no recommendation anywhere you run away to. A different city, I will follow you and make sure that the rest of your life is spent in fear of your name being tarnished. I hope I am clear." She responded with a smile. After getting up, I went outside. She stood up and began to speak. "Don't you want to know why I did it? You wanted a lifestyle that I cannot provide. You wanted to fly high but wanted someone at home when you land back. You wanted happiness but were not willing to pay the price for it. Fast cars, big fancy hotels, and good food. Your blondie lover gave you everything that I could not. You think that's right, isn't it? I'm not sure if you will understand it or not, but he was just paying for his fun time. He was already married and was looking for a cheap source of entertainment. How long would that have lasted? A few months? Then what? Would you have gone out hunting for another lover, then another? Your happiness is just a state of mind. You can be happy with less, or you can be sad with a lot. Today you stand here with an envelope in your hand and nothing else. Have a nice day, Maria." I decided to depart. A few months later, I saw her in court, but I never spoke to her and I never saw her eyes. Nothing but the court's orders were ever in my eyes. Divorce was obtained. Not a single complaint was ever lodged against me by Steve. Even if he had submitted his application, he would have been unsuccessful. The parking lot was equipped with surveillance cameras, and he would have been the one to emerge as the aggressor. Yes, I did send Linda the videos as well as all of the evidence that Steve had committed adultery. Due to the fact that she did not waste any time with him, she divorced him and threw him out of the house. Apparently, he was beaten up by Linda's brothers, and he spent a few days with some broken bones as a result of the incident. I did hear this rumor. Not only had he been divorced, but he had also lost his job. The man who was Linda's father was well connected. For the purpose of paying for his settlement, Steve did sell his Mustang. I have never disclosed this information to anyone else, but Maria's father was also interested in punishing Linda. They were stopped by Linda. I quit my job, and not long after that, I was once again hired for the same position, but this time in a different city. Life continued on. This is where I find myself today, at the airport in Istanbul, serving as the chief journalist for a major magazine, having a lot of money, a wonderful and devoted wife, and an incredible daughter. I went back into the lounge, where my wife had been talking for a considerable amount of time. My wife was constantly talking to Maria and sneaking glances at me, so I separated myself from her. I stayed away from her. I had some concerns. Despite the fact that I have never concealed my history from my wife, I have no idea what Maria has in mind right now. A few hours later, I checked with the officials at the airport, and they confirmed the time that the flight would depart. We joined the line of people waiting to board the aircraft, and after going through a few arduous minutes, I was finally on board the aircraft and sitting next to my wife. She had a smile on her face, and it was quite different from the smile she usually wears. I inquired about the conversation that she was having with that lady. I wanted to express my gratitude by asking, "Oh, that lady, your ex-wife Maria?" I looked at you with a perplexed expression. "Thank you?" I inquired. "If she had not screwed up, how would I have got you?" she exclaimed with a smile. My question was, did she even tell you that? No, she never talked about you. I read the court's orders and your investigative material. They were in the attic. What were you two talking about? I asked with curiosity. I smiled, closed my eyes, and pushed myself back into my chair. Nothing, I was just listening. How she missed her ex-husband and how she would trade everything to get a life like mine. I said out loud, "Listener, if you have made it this far, I would appreciate it if you would click the button that says subscribe. This will be of great assistance."